Let's begin the news by telling you that the House of Representatives on Tuesday urged the federal government to suspend the implementation of the Samoa Agreement over the alleged lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender clause. This comes as the lower legislative chamber directed its Committee on National Planning to investigate the agreement within 4 weeks and report back for further legislative action. The House resolution was sequel to a motion of urgent public importance brought on the floor of the Green Chamber by the Minority Leader Aliyu Madaki and 87 others during plenary on Tuesday. The Samoa Agreement is the overarching legal framework for the European Union's relations with 79 countries. This includes 48 African, 16 Caribbean and 15 Pacific countries. The National Drug Law Enforcement Agency has arrested a major drug cartel behind the production and distribution of a deadly psychoactive substance, methamphetamine, popularly known as mmiri, operating in Imo and Rivers States. This follows the arrest of the leader of the syndicate, 42-year-old Joachin Mbonu, and one of his associates, Kenneth Ofoegbu, in his mansion in Umuomi village, Ikeduru, local government area of Imo State. Exhibits recovered from the house include a pump-action gun with 4 cartridges, 419 grams of methamphetamine, 750 grams of iodine, a precursor chemical for meth, 500 grams, 2 electronic weighing scales, among others. In an effort to enhance project management and accountability, the Borno state government has launched an extensive training program for monitoring and evaluation zonal directors and desk officers. This initiative is a crucial part of the state's post-insurgency recovery strategy, aiming to boost the efficiency of health and education projects. News Central's Umari has the details.
Borno State is gradually regaining its lost glory after enduring several years of insurgency. Many communities are now resettled and inhabitants are picking up the pieces of their lives. The government is committed to the successful execution of projects in both rural and urban centers. With a focus on effective monitoring and evaluation techniques, this training initiative aims to streamline operations in health and education, fostering transparency and accountability.
They are on the field in the local government, so they are there as our desk officers. So we want them to be reporting what has transpired. So without inviting them to the head office, they cannot know what we really want. So that's why we invite them, so that we will appoint them with what we want in terms of quality and representation.
The training program encompasses an extensive array of topics, including project planning, data analysis, and the application of technology in monitoring and evaluation processes.
I have obtained much skill, in fact, and I'm going to share it on the field when assignment is given to me to look after any project by His Excellency, the Governor of the state.
We are going there to monitor, that is to supervise or carry out any duty within the ministry, in order to see that the government of Borno State and His Excellency to see that actually we have received training, we have got skills, and to move the state forward.
The government has also allocated vehicles to bolster the capabilities of monitoring and evaluation teams, facilitating field assessment in remote areas. This initiative is poised to significantly enhance the state's capacity in managing and evaluating its recovery programs. It aims to ensure health and education projects yield substantial benefits for communities affected by the insurgency. In Maiduguri for News Central, Umori.
The chairman of the Abuja Municipal Area Council, Christopher Maikalongu, has flagged off the distribution of palliative food items in the city. The distribution, which commenced at the Zone A Town Hall of the Apori settlement in Abuja, saw a large influx of residents occupying various areas of the premises. At the outset of the distribution, some residents expressed their displeasure over plans by council members to share the food palliatives ward by ward. Joining me on the news to discuss this is News Central correspondent Joshua Imarayi, who has been keeping tabs on this. Now, Joshua, hello, thank you so much for joining me at this time. Can you go ahead and describe the scene at the Zone A Town Hall of Apo Resettlement, during the palliative distribution?
Well, the scene here was chaotic right from the onset. As we entered this premises, we saw residents of Apo Resettlement littering every area of this premises. These residents have been waiting for hours waiting for the chairman to flag off the entire distribution thing. But however, as the residents here were waiting for the chairman to come, some of them expressed their disdain at which the palliative was shared the last time. They were hoping that it will not be the same this time. But however, as the distribution of the palliative commenced, the chairman announced that the palliative will be distributed by ward. He stated that the arrangement will be on a ward-by-ward basis, with the ward chairman taking this palliative home and sharing amongst the 12 political wards of FCT in Abuja.
A particular concern about, the ward-by-ward distribution plan?
Yes, some of the residents here said that the last time they had some sort of sharing of palliative here, that most of the chairmen of the wards actually took this palliative for themselves and their political parties. There were fears that this palliative, or the food items rather, would not be distributed evenly. But speaking with the chairman, he made some clarification and assertion that these palliative items were not specifically meant only for Apo settlement residents, but rather the 12 political wards in the FCT, hence the earlier organized plan of sharing it word by word.
Okay. Now, you said earlier that the place was littered with residents from Apo. Do you know how many of these residents were available or around to receive the palliatives?
We couldn't count. I couldn't count. I saw thousands of people. It was like a jamboree of food, but rather it was. I don't really think that the palliative available would supply the needs of the people I saw on ground here. We saw residents, we saw old women, we saw children, we saw youngsters, teenagers littered across the hall. If the hall couldn't even take them, even the premises couldn't take them, they had to push some outside the gate of the town hall. So they were numbering from, it was close to 1,000 people here today.
So you're saying that not everyone that actually came around, went back home with palliative or food?
I can't hear that. Can you come again?
I said you're saying that not everyone that actually came around went back with food. Is that what you're saying?
Basically, yes.
Okay. All right, well, we'll keep tabs on this and we'll get back to you in our subsequent bulletin for more update, Joshua. Thank you so much. Now, moving on, the Nigerian government has suspended duties, tariffs and taxes on essential food items imported through land and sea borders for 150 days. This announcement was made by the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, Abubakar Kyari, at a press briefing in Abuja on Monday. The duty-free import window includes maize, wheat, husked brown rice and cowpeas as part of the Presidential Accelerated Stabilization and Investment Plan to achieve food security and economic stability. Kyari emphasized government's commitment to addressing the food inflation crisis and ensuring no citizen goes hungry. The government also will import 250,000 metric tons each of wheat and maize to support small-scale processors. The federal government has also inaugurated the Renewed Hope National Livestock Transformation Implementation Committee to prioritize livestock development. In an effort to enhance health insurance coverage, especially among residents in the informal sector, The Lagos State Health Management Agency has teamed up with the Lagos State Residents Registration Agency. Permanent Secretary of the agency, Dr. Emanuela Zamba, announced this partnership during a press briefing at the State Secretariat. She disclosed that the scheme now covers over 1 million enrollees with ambitious plans for further expansion. News Central's Adeshawa Dushoga reports.
There is a critical need for health insurance in Nigeria, as recent data reveals that less than 5% of Nigerians currently have health insurance coverage. A significant factor contributing to this is the lack of access to affordable health care, which remains out of reach for most Nigerians, especially those without formal employment.
Achieving UHC, you will all agree with me, is no mean feat, and all hands must be on deck.
To address this challenge and enhance grassroots penetration, the Lagos State Health Management Agency, in collaboration with the Lagos State Resident Registration Agency, is expanding the coverage of the State Health Insurance Scheme, Ilera Eco. This initiative is part of the ongoing efforts to achieve universal healthcare coverage in the state.
As we speak, in order for the agency to reach out to the informal sector, which is our primary target, the agency has established 5 divisional offices, 14 subdivisional offices, and 16 kiosks spread across the state. Furthermore, Lashma also has foot soldiers known as enrollment officers who visit the nooks and crannies in the state to enroll residents. We have also embarked on various grassroots programs to sensitize residents at the grassroots. Through LASHMA registration, residents gain effortless access to LASHMA. In essence, the steps required after you have gotten your LASHMA registration is just 2 steps or 1 or 2 steps. It doesn't take a lot of time. So it really will save residents time. When they are getting their LASHMA, just another 1 minute or 2 minutes, you get your LASHMA enrollment done.
Since its inception in 2021, the agency has enrolled over 1 million individuals into its database, offering a subscription rate as low as 8,500 naira per year. According to LASHMA, more than 800 health facilities, both public and private, are partnered with the agency.
It's not even all public hospitals that are under Ilera Eco, because we have standards that must be met. We have some primary healthcare facilities on the scheme. We have most of the secondary healthcare facilities on the scheme, and we have a lot more private hospitals that are on the scheme.
While Lagos State has been praised for its remarkable project over the years, such as the Onje Eco initiative, which subsidizes food prices amidst rising inflation, the biggest question remains: how sustainable are these initiatives? In Lagos, for News Central, Adeshawa Dushoga.
Thank you, Adeshawa. Now, genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, have become a significant part of the food supply chain. But how safe are they from a medical perspective? Are there any long-term effects of consuming GMOs? News Central correspondent Bettina Ngweli explores the science behind GMO foods and their health impacts.
Genetically modified foods are created by altering the DNA of plants and animals to enhance desirable traits such as pest resistance, improved nutritional content, and higher yield. But how does this impact human health?
We have been doing a lot of researches on GMO foods. GMO foods are not good for human consumption. They cause cancer. They cause a lot of affliction, disease, and whatever you can think of. Through the researches we've done, we are totally against it.
The consensus among major health organizations, including the World Health Organization and the National Academy of Sciences, is that GMO foods currently available on the market are safe to eat. Even with the assumption that they may not be safe, some Nigerians are left with no alternative, considering the economic inflation as well as the inability to differentiate between GMO and non-GMO foods.
I'll buy it because there's nothing to buy. Because most food out there now, they are almost all the same.
It's said not to be too healthy, based on what I've heard in the past, that because of the fact that they use things like fertilizers to build off such. It might not be too, but they're always cheaper. Even in developed world, it's like that.
Technically, GMO foods are already on the spread because, so while technically eating GMO foods, our beings are genetically modified already. So we are all still eating GMO foods. So there's no debate, but there have been debates about its risks, but it hasn't been proven yet.
Despite scientific consensus, public concerns remain. It's essential to address these concerns transparently and based on facts.
One can assume that is something that is safe for people to use, right? But again, we need to see what the long-term implications are. There's been a lot of debates and argument around its safety and all that. But here in Nigeria, we are yet to hear from the government, even though recently there's a rumor that the government of Nigeria has said that it is safe for use, right? We also have other agencies, the Ministry of Science and Technology is there, we have NAFDAC and other agencies that can, look into this and then tell us if GMO is, is safe for us or not.
While it's natural to have concerns, genetically modified foods have been a part of human diet for decades, and extensive research supports their safety. According to the American Association for the Advancement of Science, genetically modified crops and genetically modified organisms are the most extensively tested crops added to the food supply. In Lagos, for News Central, Bettina Nwili.
The news returns after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Connected Development has called for the use of faith-based structures to help improve awareness of the devastating effects of climate change around the country and rally effective climate action to mitigate the effects of climate change on rural communities. This was during an interfaith dialogue with religious leaders and climate change advocates in the nation's capital, Abuja. Amadin Uyi reports.
With more and more emphasis being placed on effective climate action to mitigate the effects of climate change, the Connected Development has called for the use of faith-based structures because of the influence it has among residents of rural communities.
Community knowledge gap can be reduced with faith-based communities, leveraging on the existing knowledge about physical and environmental challenges, as well as the genuine recognition of risk associated with the decline in the source of livelihood across Nigeria. We believe that speaking up against climate injustice requires using moral and advocacy strategy, leveraging on faith-based organizations in amplifying these voices of vulnerable community, while working closely with civil society organizations, the government, and other key stakeholders.
The executive director of the Connected Development says that there is a need to take advantage of faith structures to engage with communities and help obtain outcomes that are people-centric and impactful in ensuring effective climate action.
It's important that we leverage on the Faith Pavilion, which aimed at that time, among other things, to encourage faith-based organizations to engage with their country delegates and increase their capacity to advocate for human and natural-centered negotiated outcome. That was at COP28 and beyond. There are evidence which suggests that knowledge gap in faith-based organizations in understanding climate sciences, the policies and implications for climate change significantly. And this has limited the potential of faith as an effective communication strategy for behavioral change, as well as the drive on climate action.
Others say local methods to tackling climate change has proven successful through demanding for transparency and accountability, while leveraging unavailable data.
What we did at Connected Development was to build the capacity of the media and the civil society and the community-based organizations to form a coalition, to come together and use our transparency and accountability model, follow the money, to be able to track some of the resources that come into their states, tracking the likes of ecological funds, ensuring that those resources are being utilized, for the appropriate usages, to ensure that women and girls were prioritized when it comes to fighting for climate change and climate justice.
Now you can point to something that is for Nigerians, by Nigerians, that was made in Nigeria, right? You don't have to use data from UK studies or American studies. you now have a piece of evidence that is locally made and you can trust it, it's verifiable.
The Connected Development also launched a policy brief as part of its research study to help government and faith-based organizations to boost effective climate action. In Abuja for News Central, I am Amadine Uyi.
To education matters, the Nigerian government is investing $2 billion in technology in the country to improve student enrollment and equip teachers so as to reduce the number of out-of-school children nationwide. Nigeria's Ministers of Communications and Education made this known at an African Educational Technology Conference in Abuja, where they identified a lack of investment on the capacity of teachers as frustrating government's target to improve education in the country. News Central's Emmanuel Bagudu reports.
How would you say the integration of
It's the African Educational Technology Conference 2024, organized by MasterCard Foundation and the Nigerian government, which is key to finding resolutions that will boost the nation's EdTech drive. Nigeria's Minister of Communications says that government hopes to attract more children back to school and improve the capacity of teachers.
A teacher is meant to use technology to teach. Sometimes it takes them 15 to 30 minutes to actually set up and get the technology to work. And perhaps a session is only for 30 or 45 minutes. So most of these teachers are discouraged from actually using the technology. So you see that significant gap. You have the innovation on one hand, which is pushing, finding new ways of investing, but it's disconnected from how technology is truly used in the classroom.
Stakeholders here present also commit to accelerating quality and equitable education for young people through technology via both formal and informal means, saying this will boost job creation.
We also have some of our facilities by some of the agencies in the ministry that will be utilized for this purpose. And the training programs will range from 2 months to 5 months.
The Federal Executive Council actually approved the establishment of a special purpose vehicle, which is now working with about 7 to 8 development finance institutions. And our goal is that over the next 2 to 3 years, we should be able to now deploy 90,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable across the entire continent. If we start to use technology in education, a lot of our young people that are out of school will now have the opportunity to be enlightened, whether they are within school or they go to community centers where they have technology will give them the opportunity, and we'll now start creating more jobs. So to the contrary, for Africa, technology will raise productivity in more of our sectors, which means we'll be creating more jobs. And finally, one thing to take into consideration is that the population on the African continent, 40% of our people are under the age of 15, which means we're very young. Unfortunately for some countries, most of the developed countries, their population is aging and is shrinking. So they actually don't have the workforce to power the future in those countries. So they are looking forward to Africa, and our people cannot help them power their workforce if they're not digitally literate.
Yeah, I'm glad you're mentioning this is an African thing, because a lot of times you see people coming out of the north, coming to Africa, trying to save Africa. And we are saying, let's have an African conversation.
With strategic partnerships in education being discussed and agreed on, it is hoped that this will transform the future of education technology in Africa. In Abuja for News Central, I'm Emmanuel Bagudu.
In the meantime, the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities and the Non-Academic Staff Union of Educational and Associated Institutions have reaffirmed their intention to proceed with a nationwide protest on Tuesday. The unions are demanding the payment of outstanding salary arrears owed to their members and insist they will not relent until their demands are met. NASU National President Makolo Hassan made this announcement on Monday. According to him, following the failed meeting on Thursday and having heard nothing from the authorities, members have met in various branches and are ready to protest on Tuesday. Hassan emphasized that despite a warning strike several months ago, the federal government had neglected the union's demands. He explained that the unions plan to escalate their demonstrations by taking their grievances to Abuja. We now head to the court where the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court, Justice John Tsoho, has denied the request to transfer the 80.2 billion naira fraud trial of ex-Kogi State Governor Yahaya Bello from Abuja to Kogi State. In a letter dated July 2nd, Justice Tsoho agreed with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission that the trial should remain in Abuja. Bello's application submitted on June 10th claimed territorial jurisdiction for Kogi. His lawyer, Adeola Adedikpe, informed the court of the transfer request on June 27th. EFCC's counsel, Kemi Pinheiro, opposed the transfer, arguing that Bello should have attended his arraignment. Justice Tsoho explained that the charges involved the conversion and transfer of Kogi State funds to Abuja, justifying the trial's location in Abuja. Rivers State Governor Siminalayi Fubara has sworn in Emmanuel Frank Fubara, who was screened and confirmed as a commissioner by the Victor Okodjombo-led assembly on Monday. The swearing-in ceremony was held at the Executive Council chambers of the Government House in Port Harcourt. Given his charge after the oath-taking ceremony, Fubara defended his recognition of the Okodjombo-led assembly, insisting it is the lawfully recognized legislative arm. He immediately assigned the new commissioner to the Ministry of Finance. According to the governor, though the new commissioner is not an accountant, he had observed him to be dutiful and diligent since they met during his campaign for the governorship election in 2023. Coming up after the break, Equatorial Guinea ex-minister imprisoned since 2022 freed. We'll bring you details in a moment. Stay with us. The news continues in West Africa, where Guinea-Bissau's president, Umaro Embalo, says the country will elect a new parliament on November 24th, months after he dissolved it, following what he called an attempted coup. These will be the second parliamentary elections in a year and a half in the West African country, which is notoriously unstable, having suffered a series of military or political coups since independence from Portugal in 1974. Embalo, who has been president since 2020, dissolved the opposition-dominated parliament in December 2023 after announcing an attempted coup had taken place. Violence erupted in the capital, Bissau, between members of the National Guard and Special Forces of the Presidential Guard on the night of November 30, leaving 2 people dead. Human Rights Watch has urged the Southern African Development Community to condemn Zimbabwe's escalating crackdown on opposition and civil society groups ahead of the upcoming 44th summit in Harare on August 17. President Emmerson Mnangagwa is set to assume the chairmanship of the SADC during this summit. Since coming to power in a military coup in 2017, the Mnangagwa administration has been accused of serious human rights abuses and has failed to implement significant reforms. Human Rights Watch, alongside other organizations, has documented numerous cases where the Zimbabwean judicial system has been ineffective in addressing alleged human rights violations. Ahead of the summit, Human Rights Watch is calling on SADC leaders to address these concerns and push for meaningful reforms in Zimbabwe. To discuss this, we're joined by Alan Ngari, Africa Advocacy Director at Human Rights Watch. Hello, Alan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Can you detail the specific human rights abuses that Human Rights Watch has documented in Zimbabwe under President Mnangagwa's leadership? How have these violations escalated since he assumed power?
since the ousting of former President Robert Mugabe in 2017, like you earlier mentioned, we have documented serious concerns of the government's failure to institute legal and political reforms necessary for citizens to freely express themselves, no matter what their political views are. Under President Mnangagwa, we have seen serious human rights violations that include abductions, enforced disappearances, arbitrary detentions, excessive use of force. The list can go on. It's quite long. There are a lot of examples that we have cited in our reports, and these are of serious concern to not just us, but to other civil society and opposition members in Zimbabwe.
Okay. Now, what does the SADC chairmanship mean for Zimbabwe, particularly considering its impact on the region's human rights landscape, especially for countries with fragile democracies or even those facing similar human rights challenges?
You know, it's an important question you asked there, and especially because Zimbabwe's president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, is going to chair SADC as of August 17th this year. But it's important for these regional institutions like SADC to send very strong signals to the Mnangagwa administration that there are flagrant violations of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, as well as other human rights treaties that Zimbabwe is a part of, and that this is just unacceptable. As we speak, over 70 activists are in detention. There were some that have been released following the Day of the African Child celebrations in June 16. But as he takes over as chair of SADC, SADC should really move swiftly to end rights violation and uphold the rule of law in that country.
Okay, just a quick follow-up on what you said. What specific actions is Human Rights Watch urging SADC to take to address the human rights situation in Zimbabwe?
I think first is to publicly demonstrate that SADC disapproves of the abuses taking place in that country and to demand that the government of Zimbabwe restore basic civil and political rights. We think that the Zimbabwean authorities should focus on implementing key reforms. These have been discussed over a number of years to improve respect for human rights, but also to really make the letter and spirit of the Zimbabwean constitution come to life. A section 210 of the constitution really establishes independent mechanisms, providing remedies for complaints and misconduct of security services. We need to see these bodies acting independently and effectively.
While they're acting independently, how do you think that the organization would or plans to leverage its influence, which is very important, to ensure that the SADC follows through on these actions?
Well, it's our view that that the Southern African Development Community can play a leadership role in placing human rights issues on the regional agenda, despite there have been there's so many countries in the Southern Africa region that have failed to protect human rights in their home. But we really do believe that this is an opportunity for Zimbabwe to stand up as it takes on this chairmanship, but also for SADC to emphasize that that the Mnangagwa government should demonstrate that it is serious about upholding human rights and the rule of law.
All right. Now, you did talk about, some of the organizations failing to protect human rights. Now, given the SADC's track record of insufficient responses to human rights crisis within its member states, Alan, what assurances exist that the organization will take decisive measures to tackle Zimbabwe's human rights issues?
Well, the elections in Zimbabwe last year showed a different picture in terms of the SADC Observer Mission report, which really did document some of the excesses of the state, some violations of civil and political rights as it relates to casting votes and the right to vote, the freedom of association. So I believe that the SADC Secretariat is really on the right track in actually stemming some of these challenges that we have been raising over the years. So the tide is changing, and there's really a good opportunity for SADC to engage with Zimbabwe on these issues going forward.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alan, for speaking to us on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving away from that, the NATO Summit, initially planned to celebrate the alliance's 75th anniversary and solidify long-term military support for Ukraine, is taking an unexpected turn as it becomes a public test of 81-year-old President Joe Biden's health and cognitive abilities. This comes at a crucial moment for the re-election campaign following a troubling debate performance. President Biden's leadership of NATO, especially his support for Ukraine after Russia's invasion, positions him as a pivotal figure in the alliance, comparable to President George H.W. Bush. His accomplishments, such as facilitating the entry of Sweden and Finland into NATO, may be overshadowed by his current political struggles. The president's performance at the summit will be critical in maintaining confidence both domestically and internationally. For more on this, I'm joined by our international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Afia, now, can you tell us, why do you think that why could NATO summit sink or swim President Biden's bid for re-election?
Well, this summit is really, really important. This particular one marks the 75th anniversary of the creation of NATO in the first place. But you have President Joe Biden entering this week diminished. He is reduced by that debate performance. That was the CNN debate that took place at the end of June. The people are still talking about the fact that he seemed disconnected, that he wasn't having a great night at all. And since then, the calls, and most of them, a lot of them from within the Democratic Party as well as out with the party, people have been calling for him to step aside as the candidate for election for the Democratic Party. Now, yesterday, he wrote this letter, which was published, and basically he said that he wouldn't be running if he did not absolutely believe that he could beat Donald Trump. He said that he has had the concerns that people have, and he's not blind to them, but he's spoken clearly and decisively, and he will be going on as the Democratic candidate. Now, Joe Biden is a person that's well-versed in foreign relations, and he should be really comfortable in this type of situation, but the stakes are high for his presidency at the moment. And if he has a poor showing at the summit over the week, whether that's behind closed doors and private meetings, or whether that's at the press conference, a solo press conference that he will be doing on Thursday, which is going to be completely unscripted, if anything goes wrong in any of those events, then it's not going to look good for him at all.
All right, now speaking of the stakes being high for his presidency, will other world leaders be concerned about the growing calls for Biden to step down?
Well, world leaders have initially been very concerned about the prospect of Trump returning to the presidency and what that could mean for the world when it comes to the various geopolitical situations, whether that's the war in Ukraine or the war in Israel, Gaza, or relationships with China, India, and other countries across the world. But now world leaders are nervous about a Joe Biden presidency. They haven't been nervous about that before. And the feeling is that perhaps they can't trust the United States. If they have one leader on the other hand, and Donald Trump, who is volatile, who is very nationalistic, who doesn't believe in that worldview, and perhaps wants to remove the US from NATO and other organizations. And then the other hand, you have President Joe Biden, who's coming across a little bit like a dictator, someone who won't take advice when he's been asked to step down, and who is acting Trumpian in ways and is determined to carry on. Then there'll be a feeling amongst those world leaders that they can't trust either presidential candidate, and therefore they can't trust the United States. And that is a very, very, very difficult position for them to be in. As we know, the United States acts like the kind of referee of the world, quote unquote leader of the free world. And if they cannot be trusted, then you have this kind of anxiety amongst world leaders, and that's not where they want to be, especially at this time where you have instability and volatility across the world.
So how are the Democratic Party dealing with the backlash, that President Biden is facing at the moment?
Well, there have been attempts by some people in the Democratic Party to speak to Joe Biden to say, look, you've had a long period of service don't let this be your legacy, that isn't working at the moment. And they're trying to understand how difficult it must be for someone to be at this point in their career and be forced to stand down. But the calls are coming from within the House, and some people within the Democrat Party are saying, yes, we understand that it's excruciating to feel like you're not up to the job. But if you're not up to the job, you must step aside to make room for others. Now, polls indicate that 3/4 of Americans and even a majority of Democrats, in fact, think the president should step down. Half a dozen members of Congress have said the same. Now, the Democratic caucus has kicked off this morning. It's taking place, and members have said that there's a sense of sadness within the caucus today. There's a sense of sadness about where the party is and also about what's happening to President Joe Biden. And this is not the position that they want to be under 6 months out from this election.
All right, well, thank you so much, Afia. With that, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, the news continues. Stay with us. In business, during a press conference in Abuja, the Minister of Solid Minerals Development, Dele Alake, announced that the Nigerian federal government has recently raised the rates and charges for activities in the mining sector. The decision was prompted by concerns over non-remittance by certain mining operators who were generating substantial profits but failing to remit them to the government. Professor Olatunji Akinade, National President of the Nigerian Mining and Geosciences Society, discussed on the Business Edge show how the increased fees are likely to impact overall investment in the Nigerian mining industry.
Now, the question you asked is how will this affect the various operators? Let me tell you the truth. It's going to significantly affect the operators because, as I mentioned to you, the factors that needed to be considered in arriving at that rate were not properly considered from our point of view. And it's possible they have fixed the rate based on the amount of a metric ton. What is the quantum of resources deployed by the operators to get to that metric tons? What is the vagaries of the financial sector that those operators are facing before getting to that metric ton? So at the end of the
And in the world of sport, Novak Djokovic brushed aside Holger Rune in straight sets on Monday to reach a 60th Grand Slam quarterfinal and 15th at Wimbledon. Now world number 2, Djokovic, the 7-time champion at the All England club and chasing a record-setting 25th major, defeated his 15th ranked Danish opponent 6-3, 6-4, 6-2. The 37-year-old Serb, still sporting a knee support on his right leg after undergoing surgery last month, set the tone for Monday's 4th-round tie when Rune failed to win a single point in the opening 3 games. He saved a break point in the 10th game of the 2nd set before carving out another key break in the 1st game of the 3rd. Djokovic goes on to face Australian 9th seed Alex de Minaur for a place in the semi-finals. And that's all at this hour. But before we go, let's take another look at some of our top stories. We told you that House of Representatives urges federal government to suspend Samoa agreement. We also told you that Niger Delta Development Commission proposes 1.9 trillion naira for 2024 budget. Finally, you heard that Equatorial Guinea's ex-Justice Minister Ruben Mange, imprisoned since 2022, freed. Send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen. Do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I'm Dashen, Usman.